go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
It's okay to be afraid of COVID, and it's okay that it's dominating your life.
Everyone should be afraid of COVID.
I can't come in, Mom. It's because of this flu thing.
We won't be free of this pandemic until we listen to the acknowledged truth. Listen to the scientists.
Science is truth.
You know, science is truth.
What is the impact to public health when people are openly questioning the science?
Now is the time to do what you're told.
By not hearing the truth, by not listening to the scientists, they are prolonging how bad the economy will be.
When I see somebody out in the world who's not wearing a mask, I instantly think you are a threat, or you are selfish, or you are a COVID denier, and you definitely haven't been vaccinated.
Trust the experts.
We're going to trust science. We're going to trust the experts.
That phrase, do your own research, it's popping up a lot in conversations about coronavirus and about COVID vaccines. Doing your own research. It seems so innocent, but it can have serious consequences. Renee, what are the roots of this phrase? I feel like I used to hear it around QAnon craziness.
If some jerk exposed my mother to COVID because they didn't want to wear a mask, I would want to kill them.
The idea that people are questioning the science behind the vaccine.
The science checks out. Even if you don't believe in the science, you think you're tough enough and you're healthy enough and you're young enough. The scientists were right all along. Eventually, the science catches up with you.
Are we doing more harm than good by questioning the science behind J&J?
Trust that vaccine.
Trust the experts.
Listen to the medical experts.
Trust the experts.
If you don't understand the science, you don't know what you're fighting.
Just let the experts speak.
So maybe you should just shut up right now.
Listen, the truth is, every 6 years, your dollar loses half its buying power. That means $100,000 today could feel like $50,000 by 2031. Prices are going up and your dollar is going down. But you can protect the value of your savings with something real, something proven. Gold, an asset that holds its value over time. At Noble Gold Investments, they make it simple to protect your savings with physical gold or silver. No high-pressure sales, no call centers, just honest guidance, one-on-one support, and transparent pricing. And right now, when you open a qualified account, Noble Gold will send you a free 10-ounce silver American flag bar as a thank you. Head to noblegoldinvestments.com today to learn more. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Tuesday, May 20th, 2025. Out of the Matrix into Prime Reality. Thanks for joining us again on X, Rumble, and YouTube in the live chat. Our wonderful moderator, Ronnie, is in the live chat, keeping everything wonderful. After yesterday's show, which, you know, we enjoyed very much, and so often... we receive sort of similar comments, and they're coming from two sides, two different perspectives. And the one is, I love the show. Why don't you continue to just focus on the good, the positive, the spiritual subjects? And then there's the others that comment and say, hey, you know, it's all good and well, but we can't just focus on these spiritual fluff, unicorn and rainbow, love and light subjects. We need to look at what's happening in the world and deal with it. Well, they're all right. What they need to see is that there is no such thing as a non-spiritual subject. We are spirit beings inhabiting what we deem to be physical body. To leave out any of the truth that we find is a self-illusion. And this is the subject of today's show. And we've talked about this before, but I think it's well worth talking about it again in more in depth. It's a principle that's called spiritual bypassing. The same thing, by the way, exists for hardcore 3D thinkers. They use certain things to bypass too, namely to bypass their spiritual journey. So it's true on both sides. What is exactly spiritual bypassing? Let's look at this. Let me blow this up a little bit here for myself. Spiritual bypassing is the use of spiritual beliefs or practices to avoid facing potentially painful truths within oneself and or the world. Usually it's both. And it was coined by psychologist John Wellwood. It describes a defense mechanism disguised as enlightenment. Instead of processing, healing, or acting with integrity, a person uses spirituality to numb, avoid, or deny. As a matter of fact, you know, I've called the folks who love to do that, and I don't really mean any, you know, ill intention, but I call them the love and light brigade. It's their answer to everything. Just stay in love and light. That's all you have to do. All you have to do is stay in love and light. And it's not true. You at your core, who you really are, already are love. Like, you don't have to become that. Your core being, the spirit being, it already is love. But you live in what you and I perceive to be physical reality with a plethora of things to keep an eye on, a plethora of things that hurt us or aim to hurt us, and a plethora of experiences from our past that already have caused harm. You can't ignore that or simply say, I'm such a spiritual person, this doesn't touch me. As a matter of fact, next to the hardcore mainstreamers who simply believe everything that's coming out of the TV box, so often those who deem or call themselves the most spiritual people are the first ones to fall for a lot of narratives because they don't pay attention, because it's not spiritual to think about these things. It's not spiritual to research these things. Clearly, if this power company puts this new smart meter on my home and it makes it so much easier, now I can track it with my app. Clearly, that's a great thing. Thank you, power company, for making my life easier and for making me see how I use power. A million other things. Oh my goodness, I'm in my favorite vacation spot, which is far away from society, but thankfully they finally put up a 5G tower so I can have reception and do my Instagram thing while I'm there. I'm sort of being a little ironic here, but the truth is that is so often the case, that spiritual bypassing has been programmed into people over the last decade, specifically in the more sort of new age spiritual community, but it's just as existent in the more traditional religious practices, is where you just give everything over to the deity, God or spirit, and it's going to transmute every bad thing that is around us, and we don't have to worry about it. That's the spiritual maturity level of a 5-year-old, and it's simply not working. We have to be conscious and truthful in every aspect of life, including all the shit that's going on in the world. That is practical spirituality. So there are two main sort of ways to practice spiritual bypassing, and usually it's both of those. One is bypassing one's own emotional wounds, trauma, and unresolved pain, which is sort of one of the key points or reasons why the world is in a state that it's in, why most of society is in a state that it's in. I'm not saying that society at large is responsible for the trauma that happened to them, by God not, but they are responsible for healing it. And if they don't, they remain to be dysfunctional beings. And that's not a judgment, that's just the truth. You know, I was actually in quite a few areas of my life, I was dysfunctional until I started my healing journey consciously. And you can't be functional while carrying all that emotional trauma. So what people say oftentimes when they want to spiritually bypass these things is, I don't want to dwell on the negative, right? Well, there's a big difference between dwelling on the negative and dealing with the negative. But why even call it negative? It's part of your experience. It's part of something that happened in your life. Dwelling on it means to continually use it as excuse or justification, but dealing with it is a healing mechanism. And what does it do? Healing does something powerful. It doesn't erase our past. It doesn't unmake what was done, but it allows us to, over time, through the healing journey, emotionally detach from the experience, and then we can turn that experience, as horrible as it might have been, into wisdom. We can take what we learned from that and use it in life. That is wisdom. When we heal and emotionally detach from those experiences, we can use it. Or people are saying, "Oh no, that's just ego. I'm not going to engage with it." Or I've transcended those emotions. Well, if you're still reacting, if it's still coming up, if it's still something that bothers you, maybe you haven't quite yet. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just deal with it. Do something about it. Feeling it again would lower my vibration. And that's the thing. When something is transmuted, you know this. You know, two sets of people that tell a story. There's the one person tells an emotional story of their past, and as soon as they start thinking about that memory, their body language begins to change. It's harder for them to find the words. You can already see that the sadness or the pain of it is coming back to them. And about a third into the story, the first tears come down, and then the voice starts to break up, and then they make it through the story because they really want to tell it, but it's an emotional drama experience for them. That is the person where that experience wasn't dealt with or healed yet. And then there's the other person, could even tell a worse story about their past, and you can tell that they have emotional distance from it. That part has been healed, and they can tell the story because they want to make a point. They want to teach maybe resilience. They want to teach the power of healing, and they use that story as wisdom of how it can be done. They don't emotionally fall apart even when they go into the details, because they've already done the work. So there's a difference in that. I'll just meditate it away. Good luck. You'll be meditating for your entire life, 6 hours a day, and you still won't be able to meditate it away, because to meditate it away is to push it out. It can't be pushed out. It can be transmuted. So what these things really do, this emotional or spiritual bypassing, is it suppresses emotion, halts healing, locks trauma deeper into the nervous system, which means that your body begins to get sick of it. It's so real. You become sick of it. And it's just wrapped in these spiritual labels and platitudes, okay? And then there is the bypassing of the outer world, where people might or might not have done the inner work to a certain degree, but they don't want to deal with the harsh realities of the situation that we find ourselves in. And so they'll say something like, "Oh, it's all just an illusion anyways. You know, it's the Maya, the illusion, the simulation. Why would I worry about it?" Listen, at your core, we are eternal, infinite beings. That's the spirit part of us. This body is neither. It's neither eternal, nor is it infinite, nor can it infinitely be abused and poisoned before it gives in. So if you, for the time being, appreciate this vehicle, appreciate this experience, and want to have it in a reasonably healthy way, you're going to have to deal with those things and know these things for your avatar are not just an illusion. They're real things happening. The poisoning of the water, the air, the food, the soil, the frequencies, the technologies, the spraying, the weather manipulation, the systemic abuse, the trafficking, those things are not illusions. They are real things in our world that do require our proper attention. Another spiritual bypassing favorite: don't give it energy and it will disappear. Not a single time in my life have I experienced anything like that. I've never experienced it. Something that I just didn't give energy just magically disappeared. I had to do something with it. I had to address it in some way, had to acknowledge it in some way, and do something actively. Ignoring anything will not make it go away. Big, big spiritual bypassing lie. If I don't focus on chemtrails, 5G, or toxins, they can't affect me. Bullshit. Most people that discover that their body is in dis-ease or sickness didn't see it coming. Most people didn't feel it coming on. They only later found out what happened and put the pieces together. That is not true. As a matter of fact, you need to be very aware of those things and have multiple strategies in place to deal with them. The number one strategy is to actively create a sort of a field of protection. That's not just a thought. That's energetic work. You need to actually create a field of protection, but that is just a mitigating of effects. Essentially, we need to ask ourselves, how can we remove that problem? How can we permanently remove the problem? Because that is literally what solutions are, is to remove the underlying problem. You know, it's like you're not going to stand out there naked in the cold rain and just say, I'm just going to meditate this away. You're going to go inside or find a blanket or do something to improve your situation. And so for some reason, thinking about solving and removing a problem has completely left the building, and everybody's just kind of, oh, I'm just going to be in high vibes here and this is not going to affect me. It doesn't work like that. Our avatars are not programmed to be like that. And even the greatest spiritual teachers have shown, proven, and said that they needed to take care to a certain degree of their bodies. And they were very, very aware of the importance of action in the world. We're going to get into that in a moment here. It's all fear-based. It's what people say to me, Jean, listen, your message is fear-based. Really? I'm not in fear. How can my message be fear-based? I'm not in fear. But I don't fear looking at the truth either. Your message is fear-based. Stay in the love frequency. Why do you think? What is the underlying frequency that makes us show up every day for the work that we do? It's love. It's love for creation, love for life, love for our fellow brothers and sisters, love for truth. That's where this comes from. Not from fear, but from love. We create our own reality, so only good things happen to me. Okay. I've said this before, and I believe 100% know this to be true. We live within this construct, and within the collective, we live in individual reality bubbles, and we have a certain definitive degree of influence over the co-creations that we experience. We experience here what we are, but there are collective things that affect us all and that cannot simply be thought or meditated away. We can use these tools to mitigate some of the effects, but we have to deal with them. Incredibly important. What these spiritual bypassing concepts do is sort of a pushing away of responsibility, things that seem too big to take care of, and so we don't want to do anything. It weakens our discernment. It really reverts our age. You know, it brings us down to a childhood sort of level where we just ignore things. Just, nah, I don't want to. No. And you know, by pretending that something doesn't exist, it sort of creates a false reality loop. So it's really not helpful at all. And you know, I mentioned that previous people that came before us, spiritual teachers, so to speak, which many of them don't like that title, by the way, and I get why. But they haven't just left us with sort of airy-fairy concepts about spirituality. They were all heavily engaged. They were all present in this world, knowing how important it is to fully integrate all of their spiritual findings into all aspects of life. That is incredibly important. You can't be on that spiritual island. It catches up with you if you ignore and pretend. Krishnamurti, who, was a wonderful, he was supposed to be, I believe, from all my research, he was supposed to be the controlled spiritual spokesperson. Sort of, they built up the what's he called, the Sadhguru, the World Economic Forum puppet Sadhguru, who was built up to be this new worldwide spiritual figure. And that's who they wanted as I think, blueprint for this new religion that they're building. And Krishnamurti was supposed to be that too in his time, and he completely rejected that. He wasn't going to take on these titles, and he just became a beautiful, love-filled straight shooter. So, and he said it's not a measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society, which, when you go deeper into what he said, is like, we're not here to run away from this. We're not here to use spirituality to ignore what's happening. We're meant to be the light that steps into that darkness, right? We're meant to, but not in this new sort of, I don't know, in a weird way. Not, the light is all there is. Light and darkness are both, two sides of the same coin, but we're meant to actually illuminate all that is happening in the darkness, and let that love slowly but surely start the healing process in it and do what we need to do. There's another guy that you might know, Carl Jung. All these authentic spiritual teachers did not tell people to ignore suffering, corruption, or injustice. They taught inner realization, but always paired with right action, courage, and discernment in the outer world. And Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul, which also means avoid facing some of the pain that's connected to that. And he also said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It's a profoundly deep statement, I believe. And it has been for Christine and myself, really, over the last years, the merging of these seemingly disconnected worlds. You have the speakers and the researchers out there that are hardcore into the applications of evil in the world. So they are studying this day in, day out, the corruption, the abuse, the murder, the torture, and everything in between. And they are very, very focused on that. And I applaud them because they bring a lot, out into the open. But at the same time, that can turn a person very cynical if we only look at that. It's when you only look at evil, after a while, you think it's all there is, really. And so it can turn a person cynical and jaded. On the other hand, if you only live in the fluff, only live in the unicorn, rainbows, love, and light, and that's, that is all you ever want to see, that is as incomplete and as illusory as the other one. What real awakening, if you will, or our liberation from so many deceptions and cycles, in my perception, really what brings that about is to finally have the courage and the maturity to look at it all, to get the full view of all that is in our reality, of all that presents itself. And with that love that we feel and with that wholeness that we embody, heal it. Be a part of that healing. I can't see any other way. You might know this guy here. One of the great books written in the 20th century. It was the autobiography of a yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda, and also from a literal, from a literature standpoint, just a beautifully written book. I've read it many times, and I think he brought the fellowship to America. He came to America and was here for many years and taught many people, and was absolutely aware of how important it is to go into all sectors. So he was teaching businessmen, and he was speaking to all sectors of society. He wasn't just cherry picking, quote unquote, already spiritually evolved people. No, the guy was actually, for his time and for his background, extremely approachable. And he said evil may be compared to a hidden sickness that attacks the human body. If you ignore it, it does not go away. It grows and consumes you. Such an important discernment. Again, there's a big sector of the quote unquote self-proclaimed spiritual community that teaches a sort of ignorance. You just don't look at it. Don't make it real. It's already real, folks. It's already there. You have to deal with it, but in the right way. Look at sickness as a powerful enemy, and you'll be in trouble. Look at it as something that wants you to see something that you couldn't see before, and you can love it for that. Sickness, so often, not always, because sickness today comes from many external sources, but sickness so often that appears over time is a sign for something that we weren't willing to address or look at. And so it has to show up in a more powerful form. But either way, it cannot be ignored. He also said, be calmly active and actively calm. So as someone who built a lot of things in his lifetime, who left behind a sort of a spiritual practice that many people still follow, that requires some action in the world. And as a matter of fact, if you think about it, if the people that expanded their awareness and raised their consciousness believe that no action is required, we would have never heard of them. We would have never read their teachings. We would have never learned that, because they wouldn't have done anything. And yet they did. They wrote the books. They taught the people. They spoke to them. They meditated with them. They prayed with them. They helped them. They showed them the way. All of those were all actions. Those were all active things in the world. The Yogananda also privately spoke out about the dangers of chemicals in food and medicine, the degradation of natural human life, misuse of technology, and money and power. So very worldly problems. And yet the guy was a highly spiritual person, and he did the samadhi, his final journey, after a meeting with his group, actually in California. And he told them that he was going to leave his body, and he did it through the most sacred form of meditation, if you will, a higher form of meditation. He left the body, and the body didn't decompose or show any signs of decay for many, many, many days. So it's not just, like a sort of a self-proclaimed spiritual guru. This guy was pretty much the real deal, and he proved it in his last action here on Earth. We're going to bring on a guest in a few days here, and probably that's going to air in a week or so, maybe a little less. Someone who's been a very serious researcher, scientist, has been around in the field for 50 plus years. And he actually dedicated a lot of his work to the study of truth, how to actually find the truth about something, how to know, how to even measure it, and how we can deceive ourselves because we want to believe something. The truth is that just because we want to believe something doesn't make it so. And so, I shy away from going for too long and too deep simply into talking about spirituality because it's not a detached subject. It's not something that exists separately from life. It doesn't exist separately from anything. It is either understood by all of us that we are spiritual beings, meaning we transcend the realm that we're in right now, or we're not. You know, the second realization is really a form of nihilism that I cannot relate to. But the first one is that everything that we sort of discover or remember as a spiritual truth, so to speak, we need to integrate and embody in our lives everywhere we go and in everything we do. The work that we do, you know, I've said this a million times, I think, and people are going to get sick of it. This quote, you know, before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. But there's a bigger story actually to this quote, and it's what happens inside the person. So before you experience enlightenment, and what is enlightenment? It's simply to remember who we really are. Before you experience it, you chop wood and carry water because that's all you know. You do the mundane things that the world teaches you. Oh, then you experience this wave of remembering who you really are, and then you go, oh, I'm above chopping wood and carrying water. I don't need to do that any longer. And then when you expand further into a greater truth, you realize once again that you're here and you need to apply yourself, and you begin chopping wood and carrying water again. But now you're doing it just like you would do healing, or just like you would pray, or just like you would meditate. Everything that you do is a sacred task. Everything that you do is infused with the love of creator and creation. And so to the observer, the guy has always just been chopping wood and carrying water, took a break in between, but came back to it. But in your experience, before you were doing a mundane task that might have annoyed you or been stupid to you, or you know, you just felt like it's repetitive. But then once spirit embodies, you're embodying spirit again, all these tasks become holy. It's not like you're talking about it and yapping and just, oh, I'm so holy. No, you're just chopping wood and carrying water. But you know the totality of who you are, and that changes everything. And so, you know, that's why the real folks that have come before us who really embodied these principles and truths, they went into the world. They didn't shy away from any truth. They didn't have any judgment over what should or should not be talked about. And they most certainly didn't try to ignore the darkness of the world to make it go away. They knew that it is their love that is brought into that darkness that can have the greatest positive effect. And I don't think any of them were attached to a specific outcome. They were just there to do the best that they could with what they had where they were. And that, I believe, is our task. So this is a journey, you know, and some days we need to really zone out of things to focus and balance. The inner work is the first thing to do. It's the most important thing to focus on. And once that chunk, that healing chunk and that inner work chunk is, the big chunk is in the works, you can then apply yourself better in the world. But we all need to become part of those solutions, because unless we do something and unless we apply ourselves, all those toxins and poisons and frequencies are simply going to increase, because that is the nature of the darkness. That's what the darkness does. If we were to just look at it without judgment and without thinking it's evil and bad, you would just say that's what it does. That's what it's supposed to do. That, you know, until it has until it has a formidable counterpart that knows itself and steps up and faces that darkness with all the love that we have inside of us. Until that happens, the darkness is just going to keep doing what it does. Because that's what it does. That's its nature. You see where I'm going with this? So we can't be above anything, above chopping wood and carrying water. Just doesn't work. All right, my friends, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here with us. I'd love to invite you to come over to inspired.locals.com. It's our supporter community, and we're going to do a show today there. It's called Coffee and Truth. That's what we do there, and it's a little different. We get to read more comments and interact more and really enjoy it. So thank you for joining us there, and thank you for being here with us. You know, we love you. We appreciate you. And we will be back with you again very, very soon.